But,
What is catering overall, what it should be?
you have to go back in time a little bit. When I first became familiar with catering, two of our neighborhood housewives had looked at this and started doing some work out of their house, and it was once a month kind of thing or something like that. And they saw some success with it, but they knew they were limited in their home kitchens and things. This would have been back in like 1974. I was 16 years old. Catering was, you ordered it, people brought it, they served it, and they would either put it out in the buffet and then help you with that or take care of it. And fine catering, and there were, back in those days, there were only maybe 8 or 9 caterers in the city of Columbus. There was a behemoth caterer, and it was called Executive Caterers, and they ran the State House, they ran the Aladdin Shrine Temple, the behemoth facility at the time, and they had a country club here over on the east side called Stony Creek. They had giant trucks with lift gates, they had refrigerated trucks, they were a massive caterer, and they were out of Cleveland. They came to Columbus because they were politically hooked up. Between the shrine and the State House and other things, they had enough business where they could create an outpost here and do a pretty good piece of business. Back then, even for them, when I took over, they were my biggest competitor, but they hadn't changed since 1964. They were still doing catering the way that they did catering in 1964, which they had servers, which were mostly all women. They had little aprons on and things. They had a little hat, almost like a paper tiara or something like that. They'd start every meal with a little vegetable dish, relish tray in the middle of the table and things, and it was very Mad Men kind of cooking and that kind of thing. And then I had 2 homemakers, similar who started made from scratch, who had grasped onto the new cooking that was going on, and it was called Nouvelle Cuisine, and a lot of the influences the East and the West Coast were coming in. They weren't doing meat and potatoes, because in the Midwest and in 1964, that it was meat and potatoes. You got meat, you got goulash, you got something, whatever it was. The homemakers that were doing the nicer food and the more contemporary food at the time, crepes and different things, that was what was in demand. Columbus was growing. We had outstripped our executive core and the people that were here in Columbus. So in order to service back then Bank One, Chemical Abstracts, and particularly at that time the Limited, was just starting up and was coming into its own. They were drawing people in from the East and West Coast as executives. Well, they wanted that kind of food. They didn't want meat and potatoes or that style. So these homemakers ended up getting space doing things, but they had no idea about commercial cooking or how to cook in volume, and they had no idea particularly about business. And so they would come to you and they would just write out on a notebook paper here like this, and they were dealing with an executive in a corporation. They're like, well, send me the invoice and stuff, and they're like, well, what are you going to do? And the corporate customer would be waiting for them to show up in their station wagon with the crock pot and warmer plates. It was a nerve-wracking experience because they weren't talking to the customer like the customer needed to be talked to, in a more of a corporate fashion, or doing things in a business-like way. When I went into business and I bought my father's company, he was basically going to go out of business, and I said, well, let me take a stab at it, I'll take it over. And I took it over, and I looked at it and I said, well, what we need to do is contemporary food, but we need to treat businesses in a business-like fashion, and that's the place in the market. And so what occurred is that caterers enjoyed a great reputation, and that they were considered fine dining. They were considered like an elite restaurant would be. And after 2001 and the internet bubble blew up, and things, technology started to advance. People didn't travel as much, particularly for corporate work, because you would have meetings and people would fly all over the country and have meetings and conventions and all these things all the time. And they built hotels, and the hotels had ballrooms where they would meet. And if you can believe it, back then, hotels were not interested and turned away weddings. Did not want weddings, did not want social stuff, did not want any of that stuff. They weren't in our market. We did weddings, we did some corporate work, but hotels were basically for corporate work, and where the executives would stay after they flew in, they'd stay in the hotel. That's where the rooms were, and then they'd go down to the meeting rooms and have their corporate meetings. Well, after 2001, with the advent of technology, and particularly with 9/11, nobody wanted to fly, and it became much more costly and things. Technology allowed for Skyping and group meetings and those kind of things to take place. And when everybody stopped flying, all these hotels had ballrooms, and they're going to go, what are we going to do? Well, we got to go after another market, so they started going after weddings. The hotel food service, when it came outside the restaurant, and now you were going into the ballroom and things, in order to have an elevated sense of what it was, they started calling that catering. So you have catering department and the hotel. And then it wasn't too long that everybody else started glomming on and saying, well, it's, we're such and such in catering, because it was a way to upgrade your brand just by labeling it another thing. I said, the CEO magazine listed the top 10 caterers in the Columbus, and we're always in the top 10. It started about 4 years ago. The third largest caterer by CEO magazine is Donato's Pizza. Well, is that really catering? Catering's become such a bastardized term. So catering, can be now where they hand a bag across from the counter to you, like at Bob Evans. Yeah, catering becomes everything. And now, just about every restaurant you see or things like this, it's, blah, 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 and catering, and it goes on. So catering and what catering is and how catering, what it means to me and what it is to us is different to everybody. So, hard part of our job is education.